What's up, bros? This is Steve here with another CG Geek Blender tutorial. This time we're texturing and rendering our TIE fighter that we made in part 1. Part 1 we did all the modeling, and now it's time to texture and render. Add materials and everything else. So, jumping over to our Blender file. After following part 1, you should have something similar to this, maybe with even more detail if you decided to push it a little bit further. But you're probably ready to render and materialize it, like I am. So without further ado, let's get into it. So before adding the materials, it's best to kind of get your environment set up. So to start, I'm going to add in a basic sun lamp. So I'm going to go to top view, place my cursor just off to the right hand side there, and Shift A, add in a lamp, sun lamp. Let's double tap R and kind of pitch that towards our model. Go to side view and kind of change the angle a bit more. Something like that and that. I think I'm going to have it coming from the back a little bit. So something like that. And let's give that a strength of, say, 6. And maybe just a tad bit orange. Cool. Now we're not sure exactly where we want the sun to be until you open up your HDR. Because if you're going to be lighting with HDR lighting, then you'll want to kind of mimic the lighting of the HDR with your lamp. So I'm going to move forward and get my HDR now. So switching over to your world settings, we're going to choose this little box here next to color and go environment texture, open. And this is just an environment texture that I got offline. I'll show you guys a link to a whole bunch of them where you can go pick one out. But this one worked pretty well for this. And so I'm just going to open that up and split my window here. Switch to my node editor over on the left here. And over here, I'm going to switch down here to my world settings. All right, this is the material nodes. This is the world nodes. So I'm going to go to the world nodes and Shift A, add in a texture coordinate node. There we go. And then Shift A, add in a vector mapping node. All right, and we'll place that in there, just like that. And connect the generated to the vector and the vector to the vector of your environment texture. Cool, so now if I switch to rendered viewport, I'm in cycles render, so make sure you switch to cycles. Now if I switch to rendered view, you see I have this. And if I hit number pad 5, you can see the HDR back there. Cool. Now I want to quick set my camera up so I know how I want the background to be positioned. So I got the HDR loaded, but I'm not going to arrange the rotation location of it until I add in my camera. So let me just place my cursor over here and then Shift A, add camera. You may already have a camera in your scene, but you can just reposition it then. So I'm going to switch over to my camera and kind of get the angle I want. So I want it to be kind of come in at this angle, somewhere over here. That's what I know. And then go down along the Z axis, so grab it and jump along the Z. There we go. And let's just kind of rotate that and then double tap R to rotate it in a position that we like. Something like that's kind of cool. Maybe something like that, though, might be more what we're looking for. There we go. So kind of on an angle. It gives it some more artistic flair. And maybe a little bit lower. Cool. And now we might also want to adjust the focal length a little bit, because depending on your scene, you might want it to be wider, more zoomed in. I think just a little bit wider is cool in this case. So I'm going to take it from 35 down to 30, and then just hit G and middle mouse wheel to pull it in a little tighter there. So something like that is looking pretty nice. Maybe lower it down a little bit lower still. And there we go. So not too bad. Now I can kind of position the sky back there how I want it. So if I switch to rendered view, you can see my HDR back there. And I want to rotate that along the Z axis here. So spinning it around the Z axis, you can kind of see how you can position the sky in the background. And I kind of like these clouds here. And the sun is up there too. You can see up there. So I want to kind of rotate it up now. So it's kind of looking like the camera's pointing upward on it. So I'm just going to take the rotation along the Y a little bit, and then along the X a little bit, and kind of position it up there. So that's cool. And now maybe just kind of zoom out a little bit so I get more clouds in there. You can do this by taking the location, depending on your scene, how you're orientated, back or forward, I'm going to take it in a positive number, and that'll kind of zoom it out a little bit. That's a little bit too much, but something like that looks good. And then maybe I'll adjust the rotation just a little bit more now to something like that. And that looks pretty good for the clouds. Maybe adjust the rotation of that a little bit. And then I can rotate it down just so I get some of these clouds back there too, which is kind of cool. But I'm pretty happy with that. So we'll leave it at that, and maybe turn the strength of that down just a tad in our world settings here. Turn it down to about 0.9 or something. Awesome. So now that we can see that our sun is kind of straight above it, we can kind of come into our real world here and just kind of tweak our sun so it's matching the sunlight of the HDR a little bit. And that looks like it should be pretty accurate. Something like that. Cool. And it should be good. So if I switch to rendered view, you can see us mimicking it pretty accurately. So there is the lighting. Now time for the materials. One more thing with the environment here, though, is it's a little bit desaturated, and I might like a little bit more contrast in it. So I'm just going to grab these 3 nodes, including the environment texture, and my world settings here, pull them over, and Shift A, add in a color, brightness, contrast, and a color hue saturation. And now I'm just going to crank the saturation up to about 1.2. It gets a little bit more blue in there, and then put the contrast up a little bit, so you get a little bit more contrast, just maybe 1. And that looks a little bit better. So onto the materials. One thing with the lighting is I might want to take the size here of the shadows down a little bit smaller to like a 0.08. They'll just kind of sharpen up the shadows and make them a little bit less soft, adjusting the size here. And that should do it. One thing on the model, you might want to turn the rendered viewport on the subdivisions up to something higher. And all right, let's add the materials now. So I think I'll start with the wings. Well, no, I'll start with the center here and then move on to the wings. So switching to my materials, I have just a basic diffuse material added in here. Just add one if you don't have one already. And basically, I'm going to go ahead and create... No, I'm just going to leave it at 1. And switch over to your material editing nodes down here, the box there. And you can see the basic diffuse texture there. And I'm going to add a few glossy shaders to this. So I'm going to Shift A, add in a shader and a mix shader. And I'm just going to go ahead and put that in twice by Shift D'ing it. And now I'm going to add in a glossy shader. And this glossy shader is going to plug into the bottom. And then I'll duplicate that one and plug another one into the bottom. And basically, these are going to have different roughness values. This one is going to be controlled by a texture. And then this one's just going to be pretty sharp. So I'm going to go down to like a 0.1 on it with the roughness. Cool. And one other thing, I'm going to be adding in a texture for some grunge on this model. So to do this, I'm going to first add in a input RGB. So basically, this is just a color, but I can then mix it with a different color and then plug it into the diffuse color. So I'm just going to give this a slight blue-gray, kind of a silver color, something like that. Very, very slight. And plug it in to the color there. All right. So if we go rendered, you see we have that. Very glossy coming in right now. And I haven't changed the amount on the mix shaders yet. But I know that I'm going to want the sharp to be pretty minimal. And then I'll turn this down to about a 0.3 or so. We'll adjust that later. But with this part done, I need to quick do some unwrapping on my mesh. So I'm going to tab into edit mode, select it all, and then switch to face select mode and unselect the wings here because I'm going to be unwrapping those separately in a different manner. So I'm going to go Shift L and unselect those. And then you can just go ahead and unwrap. We'll go Smart UV Project, and that'll just do a pretty decent job of unwrapping the whole thing for us. And while I'm at the unwrapping process here, I think I'll do the wings now. Basically, you're going to want to switch to your object data tab right here, and go New UV Map. Change this one from blank UV Map to, we'll just name it Wings, I guess. And let's go to side view here, tab into edit mode. And basically, I want to take this wing shape. Let me just hit L to select it, and then Control I to select everything else but the wing, and then hit H to hide it so it's not in my way. But basically what I want to do here is unwrap these triangles to be orientated all the same way. So before we get into unwrapping, I'm going to switch from my node editor over here over to my UV image editor. And I'm going to open up the texture that I'll be using on the wings. So just go Image, Open Image. And this texture is basically a metal plate that I got off CG Textures. I'll give a link to it in the description. But I thought it looked kind of good pattern, wise, and it worked well with a little bit of color adjusting as the X-Wing texture that you see. Let me jump over here. In the X-Wings, you can see what I have there, and then you can see all of them have that kind of plating texture. Alright, so jumping back over here now, I'm going to select these two faces, just like both of them, and let's, with the UV map wings selected, and you got to make sure about that. Select both those. We're going to go U, unwrap. You can see we get two triangles there. And that's nice, but not exactly how I want it orientated. So I'm going to go U and go project from view. Let's go project from view bounds so it fills up the screen there. And now we have two faces here. If I switch to face select mode, we got two faces here, one on one side and one on the other side. And those are overlaid on top of each other just the way we want them. So I'm just going to keep doing that now. You know what? I'm just going to select both these now. So box select both those faces. U, project from view bounds. And then select those in the UV image editor here and just rotate them 180. So now they're exactly orientated the same way the bottom ones are. And that's exactly what we want. Now let's select these. Go U, project from view bounds. Alright, we got that. And then let's select these, U, project from view bounds, and you can see it's putting them all in there just the way we want them. Select those, U, project from view bounds. Those are upside down. That's okay though, because we'll flip them. And let's grab those, U, project from view bounds. And whoops, we gotta do them separately. So project from view bounds, unselect it, and then select that, and project from view bounds. Now we can select them both, grab them, and rotate them 180. You can see they're off a little bit there, but not a whole lot, and I'm not too worried about it. If you just grab those vertices there in vertices select mode here, and scale them along the X to 0, that will straighten them up for you nicely. Alright, so I think that is it. It looks like it's all orientated properly. So that should work. So good, we got the unwrapping out of the way, and let's get back to the materials now. So switching from our UV image editor here, and go to node editor. And let's add a little bit of that grunge onto the model here. So I'm just going to go Shift A and add in first add an attribute node. This attribute node will work for assigning the UV map to the image texture. And we want this top one for this new grunge map I'll be adding. So just select it, double click it, copy it, and Control or Alt V it over there. So now we know it's going to be this texture that this new image texture I'm going to add is going to use. So now add in that image texture, connect the vector to the vector, and let's open up our grunge map. This is another CG texture. I'll give a link in the description. And yeah, it's just a black and white image with some grunge on it. And it worked pretty nice after I adjusted it a little bit for the grunge on it. So basically what I want to do first is, well, let's add in a color mix multiply. Alright, and if we go rendered, we should see, well, we don't see it yet because I didn't connect it to the bottom, but connect the color to the bottom, and let's crank the strength up a bit. And you can see some of that grunge starting to come in where we want it. So that's looking okay, but it's very low res right now. And that's basically because it's not wrapped around it a whole lot. It's basically stretched and low res. So what I'm going to do is add in a mapping node like I did on the world settings. Plug it in there. And now if I change the scale to be like 4 on each of these, basically it'll be mapped 4 times across. And now you can see you get those nice scratches coming across my mesh nicely. So that's good. and that looks a bit better. So what I want to do now with this grunge map is Shift A, add in a color or converter color ramp. Plug that into the factor. And now I'm going to take this and greatly pull in the black and white to condense down that black and white. And then you can use this as the factor for the roughness in your glossy shader. And you'll see what that does is basically affects the shininess and the density of the shininess. The scratches we want to be less harsh, and these we want to be more harsh. And you can see that that's kind of working like we want it, except for the fact that the strength is too strong. So what I want to do, and also it's possible that we could try flipping that, seeing if we get better results. So clicking this will flip the colors here and basically invert it. And it's nice both ways, but I think I'll just leave it the way it was. And, well, maybe not. Maybe the other way was more accurate. So I'll flip it back, and then just kind of adjust the black and whites here a little bit. So that's looking pretty good. And then maybe more white or less white. Something around the middle is going to be good. And now we just want to turn the amount of this down a bit. So what I'm going to do for that is just add in a basic color mix node, plug it in there between the glossy and the color ramp. And I'm just going to mix this in with a white texture, I believe. And if I turn the factor all the way up, we should have none whatsoever. And that is working. We still have the glossiness from this shader, but if I turn the factor down, you can see there's nothing. I don't want nothing, but I want a lot less. So now I can just take this factor and give it like a 0.9, or maybe more, 0.6. And you can see some of that glossiness coming back into it. So that's pretty cool, and not bad. Might want to adjust the color ramp a little bit yet, but let's pull this back here. Pull some more whites in. I think I want to go the other way with it. And you can see it's coming in, and it's looking okay. Not too bad. Maybe turn the amount up just a tad, so we can kind of see what we're doing here. Pull the scratches back a little bit, and then maybe something like that was better. And then we can turn the factor back up to turn the amount down again. So about a 0.5 looks pretty good. And now let's adjust the amount of sharp glossy here. I'm just going to go to about a 0.1, maybe even less, 0.06 on this. You can see we get some of that sharper glossy coming in on there. And it's looking pretty good. Last thing is I want to add a little bit of bump to this scratch. So just add in a shader, or not a shader, but a converter or vector bump. We'll take this color ramp node with our grunge texture as the height, and then we can just plug the normal into the normal. Whoops, grab the normal, plug it into the normal there, plug it into the normal there. And you can see it's way too strong right now, but I'm just going to take that strength down about 0.2, and you can see the bump coming in. Now the bump is kind of coming in the wrong way. It looks like the scratches are raised and not lowered. So I'm just going to invert the bump there, and now you can see the scratches are into it, and that's kind of cool. And let's just turn the strength down even lower to about a 0.1. You might want to tweak that even more, but that doesn't look too bad. You don't want to go over the top, but I think that's okay. Let's turn the amount of multiply up a little bit on our grunge, so it comes up a little bit more there. And I'm pretty satisfied with that now. So that's looking pretty good, and it's time to add in a few more materials. So go to your material settings, click the plus button there, and I want to adjust the color of this a little bit, but not so much all the glossiness. I want to kind of keep that in these new materials. So basically, I'm just going to grab that material that I just made, material, and then if you click this little 2, it'll make it its own copy of it. So it's not changing that, but it has all those materials now, basically like a copy of those materials to a new material. So now I can kind of adjust the color a bit, and this is going to be for like the rim here and some other parts of it that are going to be a darker color. So I'm just going to take my color and turn it down a bit in brightness, and then let's change the viewport color here a little bit. Grab that and give it that darker color just by selecting this one over here. And now I can tell when I assign this to certain parts of the mesh which ones are darker and which ones are brighter in the viewport. So tabbing into edit mode, let's unhide that what we hid before with Option H. And let's select this ring here for one. This is going to be something that we want a darker color. So I'm just going to Option click that outer ring there. Or let's just do the center one there. And then Control plus. And I got most of that there. We've got one more ring we want to select here. Oh no, it looks like I got it all. No, I'm missing this one here. So Option Shift right click and we can select that edge loop. So all we have to do is assign, and you can see that was darker. And now if I switch to rendered viewport, it looks darker, and that's pretty nice. Maybe just a little bit darker, but I'm pretty happy with that. So now I want to do the same thing in a few different places on my mesh. So let's switch to solid view again, and let's do that a few places. So let's look at the reference image first and kind of pick out what we want to be darker. You can see this is a lighter silver, and some of the guns and some of the brackets might be darker colored as well. Then let's jump over to the some of the other images here. This one has a few darker areas on some of the detailed parts. And then in my render, I did some darker areas on some of these parts and detailed areas that I added. And then also parts of the wing here are more darker. So let's just add those in. So yes, to start, let's grab the barrel to the blaster here. And at least the tip of it on the front face can be the darker color here. So assign that to it. And then maybe some of the areas around here, let's grab that little box. Just grab the top face and Control plus. Assign the darker material to it. All right. Maybe this pull underneath here, or just the rings. Let's do the pull. That would look kind of cool, I think. Underneath there can be darker, I think. Let's just assign that to it. Cool. And then these rings could all be done. So I'm just going to Option select those rings. Command Z. Option select those rings. Cool. All around. Just Alt clicking, holding Shift and right mouse wheel. There we go. Or my right mouse button, I should say. I got a few more here. Just grabbing them. You only have to do one because then we can expand the selection with Control plus and get the rest of it. But there we go. That one. Whoops. Command Z. That one. That one. And we got two more here to do. So real quick, grab that one. That one. One more here. And then over here we got two. And there we go. Whoops. Last one had to be a problem. Option. Whoops. There we go. So now with all those selected, I'm just going to go Control plus. And you can see I get the whole little edge there. And now I'm going to assign that darker. And bam, we have it. It also did the outer ring there. I guess I selected that. And woo, it looks like I selected a few faces here. That I don't want. So let me just grab those faces there. Those, and those. And for now, we'll just give them back the normal material. But there we go. You get the little dark rings on there. The blaster's darker. And if I switch to rendered, you can see those things show up darker. So cool. That's what I want. And one other thing, I think this frame here gets a darker color. Let me quick check our images here. Well, maybe not. It looks a little darker. I think I'll give it to it. So just tab in edit mode, hit L to select that unit there, and apply the darker material to it. Cool. And it looks like this got moved at some point in time. Don't really want that to be so big. So I'm just going to rotate that a little bit and pull it in a little tighter there. Something like that. It's more how you're supposed to be. Alright, it's better. Now let's do the glass. So new material, and we can quick name this one glass. There we go. And this is going to be the glass behind this window here. So in our material here, we have just a basic diffuse now for that new glass material. Just going to delete the diffuse, Shift A, add in a shader, and a glass shader. And then also, I'm going to add a mix shader, and one more shader, a glossy shader. Now, Let's mix the glossy with the glass and plug that into the surface. And we'll see what this is. Whoops. Go back to solid view and rendered. We'll see what this is looking like after, of course, I apply it to this glass back there. So to select the glass, let's just grab that row of middle vertices there and go Control plus until we have enough. Looks like that takes it right to the black there, so that's perfect. Grab the glass and assign it. Let's give the glass a little bit of a different color so we can tell what it is there. Cool. And let's go to rendered view and see what this is looking like. So you can see the glass coming up there. And the roughness on it is too harsh because of the glossy here. So I'm going to take the glossy down to about a 0.02. And you can see you get much sharper reflections coming in there. And then I'm going to turn the amount of glossiness down on the mix shader. So we'll go to like a 0.1. So this is only 0.1 of that. And then the other half is, the portion is glass. You can also adjust the IOR value a little bit here. But realistically, glass is somewhere around 1.45. So I'm just going to leave it at that. And you can see that that's not looking too bad. You might want to adjust the roughness even more. Maybe that's too much reflection. So maybe give it like a 0.5. So it's a little blurrier, but you get the idea, and that looks not too bad. So now let's add the wing texture detail on. So we have to make one more material here, and this one is going to be wing. We'll just name it wings. Let's tab it edit mode, hit L to select that entire wing mesh. Let me try and get that. Let's go face select, there we go. And assign it to the wings. And let's give this a darker viewport color too so we can tell the difference. There we go. And so now I'm going to, let me bring that over. Now I'm going to add in that image texture that I told you guys about that we already opened up for unwrapping. So we're going to add in image texture. And then we can just grab it there, the metal plates painted one. Plug the color into the color of the diffuse. And now, because we want it to use this wings UV map, I'm going to Shift A, add an attribute node here, and we'll just copy that. Command C and Command V. Very good, and plug the vector in there. So if we go to rendered view now, we should see that. And not exactly what I want. Looks like I need to rotate some of these in the UV image editor here. So let's switch to the UV image editor here and go to solid view. And basically the angles here are off. So I want to select those faces on both these sides here. Very good. If I go to rendered view, you can see, yes, those are the ones that are off. I want all the points to be pointing inward, and they're not. So with all those selected, if I start rotating them, you can see it changes them there. And basically I need to find what puts them in the right spots. Let me just start off rotating them 90 degrees. That puts them closer but not on properly. So what if I rotate them a little bit more? There we go. That's more of what I'm looking for the bottom ones at least, but not the top ones. So you can see I have to do this in two different sections. So I'm going to tab out of edit mode here, or go into solid view. And basically I need to do it with these and with these. And then I'll do the other ones on their own. So go rendered view. And we'll just rotate these until they're pointing right up there like we want. Something like that looks pretty good. If we have this part of the triangle flat across here, we know we got it pretty close. So something like that looks about right there. And now let's do the same with those other faces. So let's go object view, or solid view, right here. Tab in edit mode, and select these. Oops, unselect everything. Then select those two, and those two. And I think these are going to have to be rotated the other direction. So inside view, we can rotate these until this top edge is straight. And that looks like it will get it right on then. Cool. And there you go. That's the rotation of that, and it looks like it is working well. One thing here, the wing looks a little narrow here because this is not coming all the way through. That's a little weird. Don't Don't know how that happened, but let's just scale this along the X a little bit. And let's turn on proportional editing connected. Scale on the X. Make that a little bit bigger and just kind of pull that out a little bit there. Got kind of hidden in there. It looks like this one got scaled down. Let me just scale that up then. Whoops, scroll down. Too much scale now. And scale you up. There we go. And now we see that again. Cool. So in rendered view, we get that. And you might want just a little bit more detail than that. So if you tab into edit mode, hit L to select that whole mesh, grab all the faces and scale them up. Let's scale them to 0.15. Whoops. Scale them to 1.5. There we go. And go to rendered viewport. Not bounding box, rendered. There we go. You can see we have a little bit more detail on those. And it doesn't look too bad. These are a little bit off. So we just need to scale those out along the X a little bit. So if we grab those real quick, we can just do that. Scale them on the X a little bit there to make them match. And scale along the X downward, I guess, is what we want. And that looks like it matches better. Cool. So now in the node editor, we need to adjust the color of our wings. They're too blue, and you can see in the real images here, if I switch to solid view, that they're not so much blue, but darker, almost black, and reflective, kind of. So we're going to need to add some of that to this. So to start, I want a bit of glass to them. You might think glass is a little weird, but glass is kind of what they look like. They're kind of like solar panels, and a little bit of glass mixed into these shaders I think looks nice. So I'm going to add a mixed shader and a glass shader. And the color of the glass can be the texture. And we'll plug that into the bottom there. And then I'm going to add in another shader here and another glossy shader. And we'll plug the glossy into the mix. And let's start seeing what that's looking like. So that's way too glossy. Let's turn the amount of that down. And then the amount of glass has to go down as well. Doesn't seem like this is showing up when I go to rendered now. Is that because of you? Let me just see if I do that. Huh, this glass is kind of messing up the color, it seems. Oh, I'm sorry, I was plugging the color right into the mix shader. It needs to go into the diffuse. I just need to pull that before the mix shaders, hook it up to the mix shader, and then hook the last mix into the surface there. Alright. Now I can kind of pull these out of the way there. And you too. Let's go solid view and set this up. So the color goes into the color, and now that should work fine. Rendered. Alright, you can see some of that coming through. Maybe a little bit more with the glass. Cool. You can kind of see through it just a little bit there. That's kind of neat. And then the glossiness, I'm going to make this a little bit sharper. 0.1. Turn the amount of glass down just a little bit. And let's adjust the amount of color. What if I took the color into the glass? Do I want that? Let me see. It seems a little better. I might be able to turn up the amount if I have it connected like that, because it's a little harder to see through. But alright, that seems a little better. Great. So I'll switch to solid view, and let's do a few more adjustments on this. So first of all, the color of our image texture here needs some adjustments. So I'm going to start off by adding in a color hue saturation value. And let's just pull that out here a little bit more. Give us some room to work. And plug that into the bottom there. And if I go rendered now, we should be able to see. Alright, now I want to take the value down a little bit. We'll go down to about a 0.6, so it's much darker. Maybe 0.5. Cool. And maybe just the amount of hue a little bit on this as well. So if you kind of tweak the hue, you don't want green, you don't want purple, but maybe just a little bit of 0.46 to give it a little less blue looking. Alright, and then turn the saturation down a bit as well. And then take the value maybe down a little bit less as well. And we're getting something closer to what we're looking for. I think just a little bit of contrast would be cool. So let's add in a color, brightness contrast. Add in a little bit of contrast. Maybe take the brightness down a little bit there. And that's looking pretty on to me. Maybe go a little less green there, 0.48. and that's looking pretty nice. So one other thing I want to do to that is I want to add some grunge to these textures as well. So I'm just going to add in a color mix, switch it to multiply, plug that in there too. And let's add in that shader, or that texture again that I used, the grunge maps there, and multiply that down to the bottom. Make sure it uses the same vector right there. And let's give that a 2 on the multiply, so we get a little bit more of that coming through. You can see some of the grunge coming in there a little bit. And if I actually use this grunge map as the roughness for the glossy here, we can see that helps a little bit to add some realism to it. I think we just want to add in a color ramp though, like we did before. So converter, color ramp, plug that in there, and now we can kind of tweak it even more. Let's put this as the roughness of the glass. No, let's not use it on the glass. But I can kind of pull this up and pull this up and kind of pull those scratches out of that background a little bit more. You can see what it's looking like there a little bit, and that's too much. Definitely too much black. But you can see this dirt coming onto it, and that's cool, like we want. And let's just turn that down a bit, though. Very good. And let's turn the amount of glossy up a little bit now. You can see it coming through there now, and it's not looking too bad. One other thing, if I jump over to my finished render here, is I don't think I have enough of a little bit of a blue tint to it. So I'm going to take my color and give it just a little bit of blue there. And then my darker color here too, let's darken it up a little bit more and give it just a tad blue. Alright, that's sure to help. Are we missing anything? I think we're getting close to being done. Let me select. Alright, I did all this unwrapping wise, but I want to select just, unselect all that, boom, just this part, and let's unwrap that again. So I think to unwrap this, I'm just going to go straight on. You project from view bounds, and now that should look whoops, actually I did that on the wings one. I want this to be done on the UV map one as well. Let's tab in edit mode, Command Z, select the UV map one, and we'll unwrap these prongs, or whatever you call them, to there nicely. So now if I go rendered, you can see those look a little bit better. And the color on our wings need to come down a little bit. It's still too bright. So let's turn the brightness down a bit more, crank the contrast up a little bit more. And that's looking pretty good. Maybe multiply this grunge a little more on there too. And that's looking pretty close, just a little darker maybe. Sometimes it'll look different when it's rendered, so you don't want to go too dark right now. But adjusting this gives us a little bit of results that we might be good too. Just a little bit. Cool, not too bad. And now one last thing, the bump mapping for this this metal texture. So let's add in a vector bump. We'll grab this texture here as the height. And I also want a little bit of bump from the grunge here. So what I'm going to do is just duplicate this bump node, plug the normal into the normal of it, and then grab that color ramp and plug it into the height. And then I can take this normal into the glass and into the diffuse right there. Let's plug it into there. And into the glossy. So you can see with that normal plugged in, you get those creases showing up nicely. Strength is a little high, but it's looking pretty good. The textures look a little bit off on some of these on the inside here. I'm noticing these are a little bit stretched, and this one is messed up there. So we gotta tweak the unwrapping here a little bit, but we're getting close to finishing up on the textures here. Let me just see what we got here. If I go to UV image editor, yes, this one's messed up. Let me just go front view, project from view bounds, and then need to scale it up 1.5 like I did everything else. And then let's see how we need to rotate that. It looks pretty good right there. All right. Except I did that right there. I think I want to do that there. But let me see. Yeah, that's looking pretty good actually. We gotta fix that one there though. So let's just That's really right there would be this face actually. And yes, you can see that one's messed up bad. So you project from view bounds, scale it 1.5, and how do we need to rotate this? Let me just see here. Move my viewport over there. Rendered. And I think I just need to rotate this to be about here. No, that's going the wrong way. Rotate the other direction. Over there. Just until you get them pointing the right way, and that looks right. Like right about there. Looks right. And so that's good. And that should do it for that. So I think our materials are pretty much more or less done. We can do some more tweaking and more adjusting. But I'm getting pretty happy with them. One thing you can do is if I switch to my node editor here real quick, you could add one more glossy shader onto our normal texture here. Shift A, add that, and one more mix. Plug the glossy into the mix there. Maybe give this a little bit more roughness, like a 0.2. And we could add in a input Fresnel, whatever you call that. Fresnel, I think that's what you call it, yeah. And take the IRR value of that for the glossy there. So that'll give you a little bit of a edgy look for the glossy, and may or may not be what you're looking for, but it kind of looks, well, that's adding a little bit too much glossiness to it. So if you adjust that, it goes more or less, but something like that's not too bad. And it might just be a little harsh, so I might just add in a color mix node, and let's just mix some white into that. Turn the white value up. And if I mix it 100%, that's all glossy. So I guess I need to mix black into it, I'm sorry. And so if this is on all the way, it should be off for the most part. So we can go about a 0.5 just to turn down the amount of Fresnel there. And maybe put the normal into that as well there. Cool. That doesn't look too bad. Let's turn the amount of this glossy shade down a little bit. And that's looking pretty finished. I think I might want to turn the roughness of this up a little bit. And then I think I can turn the amount up a little bit as well. Something like that. Maybe 0.35 there. But that was looking pretty much pretty good to me. Doesn't look too bad. Maybe the color could be even a little bit more blue here, but not bad. There we go. Maybe a little brighter. And that looks pretty good to me. So let's get into rendering it now. Well, actually, one last thing. These buttons should get that darker material. So I had some other materials applied to those already. Let's just go new material and grab that darker one here. Yes, that's it. And if we go rendered now, those should have darker. All right. So that looks pretty nice. And let's do some finished renders here. So one thing I want to do is in my world settings here, actually my these settings here, I can come to color management, and I want to give this a, let me see here, a view of film. And you can see that changes the colors a lot. I can kind of bring them back now though with the exposure settings and the gamma settings. But this will give it kind of a filmic look, which always looks pretty cool. And so I'm going to add that in. And I think now I can turn the amount of brightness back up on my environment lighting there. And that looks better. And then again, the wings might be a little dark after that. So you may have to tweak some of your textures after doing that. But it kind of gives it a cool filmic look, which I like. So I can turn the brightness back up a little bit on those now. And that is looking decent. Crank those back up, and we should be ready to go. So with that done, maybe just bring the exposure and gamma up a little bit here. Have the exposure to 0.2, gamma maybe at 0.13, and that looks good. So before I render this now and do the compositing, I think a few of you might be interested in knowing how I did the lasers. And luckily for you, it was extremely simple. You could do a much fancier laser if you want to put more time into it. But to do the lasers, basically, I'm just going to add in a cylinder right there. Let's turn the vertices amount down to about 16. Or actually, we can go even down to like 8. And I'm just going to add in a subsurface modifier to that then. Control 2. And that will give it a subsurf at a level 2. And now I want to scale this along the Z. So we get this elongated sort of laser. Alright. Let's enable smooth shading by hitting T and then smooth shading. And then scale that way down. Maybe scale along the Z a little more now. And something like that. Alright. Now I'm going to rotate that 90 degrees along the X. So we have that. And that looks pretty good. Maybe just scale on the Y a little bit there. And basically I'm just going to add in an array modifier on top of that. Kind of pull it out this way so it would have been like the same spot. Let's pull it down a little bit. Other blaster there, roughly to the right thing. And then let's give it a different distance along here. So it's at a different level. And I think actually flipping this would work better in our composition here. So I'm just going to go front view, and I'll just rotate that 180 to flip it over there. There we go. Now if we go to camera view, you can see what I have here. I'm going to pull these back a little bit, turn the distance amount down a little bit, and maybe scale them up just a tad. And then we can turn that down a little bit more. But you can see I have 2 lasers in here now. Let's pull it over there. Let's kind of rotate them towards the camera a little bit, just so they look a little bit cooler. Something like that, I think is good. Yes, that looks like it should work just fine. Scale them up a little bit more now. And pull them back. If you scale them up too much, they'll look fakey. There we go. And this is just going to be a basic emission material. So I'm going to go emission, and then the amount I want to be about 10. And then the color is going to be a lime green, but not 100%, just mostly green. Something like that. And you don't want to go 100% because you can see in the little material preview right there and right here that it actually doesn't go 100% green unless you take it all the way to the edge. And that's what I want. So don't take it all the way to the edge, but something close to the edge like that. And maybe just a little darker there. Cool. So save your project. Let's open up our window here. And let's render this. So I'm going to go to my render settings. Let's give it a 100% render there. And not that many samples. I'll give it 100 samples. And, well, I guess I'll give it 200 samples. And we'll give this a render, and we'll see where we're going with it. So, hit F12. Oh, new render output. That's because I had deleted my nodes. You should be fine. But if you have that issue, add in a render layer and add in a output composite. Connect it up. And we're good to go. So, F12 to render, and I'll be right back when this is done rendering. Alright, so there's my my first render. It looks pretty nice, and I have the blasters coming in there like I want. But one thing I forgot to mention is blur and focus. We didn't cover that, so I want to quick do that. First of all, depth of field. So I'm going to select my camera. I'm going to go to my camera settings here, and I'm going to, you see I have these depth of field settings. Basically, I want it to be focused on my TIE fighter. And this is called sphere. So I'm just going to take sphere and plug it into the focus length. And if I turn on limits, you can see where it's focused there. And it's right on there. So that's what I want. Now I'm going to take the aperture, change it to f-stop. And I'm just going to give it about a 1.4 on the depth of field there. And let's give it 5 blades and 15 rotation. This is just the bokeh blur. This is called sphere, and I have sphere 1 in here. I want sphere. There we go. Okay, so now we're almost ready to render, but one other thing is motion blur. Now, this is a still render, so there's no animation going on, and there's going to be no motion blur unless we do something about that. So to do the motion blur, what I'm going to do is keyframe this a little bit to give it some motion. I don't want too much motion blur, but just a little bit kind of looks cool. So the way to do this, though, is what I'm going to do is basically at frame 20 is going to be the frame I'm going to render. And this is going to be this position right here. So I'm going to grab that and let go with automatic keyframing turned on. And now you can see it put a keyframe right there. So now I'm going to jump to frame 1, pull it way back, something like that. And you can see it automatically put a keyframe in there. So now it's moving up to frame 20. And now I'm going to go to about frame 40 and pull it past the camera. And you can see now it goes right by, but at frame 20 is right where I want it to be for the animation. Now, for the motion blur, you can get some cool results if you also keyframe the camera to follow it. That way the background might be a little bit blurred and like the wings might be a little blurred, but the center of the TIE fighter will be focused with motion blur applied. So what I'm going to do is the same thing with the camera. I'm going to insert a keyframe right there just by grabbing and then left clicking to make sure it stays there. Put the keyframe in there. Now frame 1, I'm going to rotate the camera over to there. Puts the keyframe in there. Frame 40, rotate the camera over to there so it follows it. Now you can see if I go to frame 20, there's movement going on with the camera there, and that will help add some motion blur to it. So now I need to turn on motion blur. That's just in my render settings here, motion blur. Turn that on. Don't go crazy with it. Maybe like a 0.2 would be a good amount. Save it. And we don't have to worry about motion blur with the blasters because they're already stretched out and blurred looking. But maybe turn the strength of those up a little bit, and we should be ready to go. So save your project and let's render one more time with blur applied now. Alright, so that looks a bit better. 0.2 was a little bit more motion blur than I cared for, so I did turn it down to 0.1. And you can see you get some motion blur coming in around the edges here, and it just looks a little bit better. The background's a little bit blurred as well. One thing, it looks like the texturing on this section here is still stretched a little bit in the wrong way. So we might quick fix that. Just switch over to my 3D view here. And let's just grab that face here and here. Let's switch to our metal plates there so we can see them. And let's go to rendered view and see what's going on here. It looks pretty good from that side, but this side definitely looks a little bit stretched. And what we can see we have with the wings selected, we have a little bit of an issue. Alright, that one looks fine. And that one looks fine as well. Whoops, what did I get there? Not grabbing the right. There we go. So I think they just need to be scaled out a little bit more. Or inward, I guess. So let me go rendered. And scale them along the X a little bit there. And that looks better. So that's fixed now. And you could do another render. So I'm just going to quick do that to have a nice clean image. And one other thing before I do my finished render here I forgot to mention is I want to add a little bit of AO to it. So with your model selected, go to your render layers, under passes, turn on AO there, and that will give you a little bit more options in the compositor to add a little bit of ambient occlusion to your model. So go ahead and do that, and then you should be ready to go. Okay, so now we should be good to go. We got our render here, and I'm going to switch to the compositor. So in the compositor here, first thing I want to do is add that ambient occlusion to my render. So I'm just going to add in a color mix. We'll switch it to multiply and plug the AO into the bottom. And then I'm going to go Control Shift, click that so I can see the whole background with the viewer node. So Control Shift adds in a viewer node there. And seems like we're getting a little bit of an issue with that AO. Alright. Nothing I can't fix with a little bit of tweaking. But basically it's rendering that black back there. That's going to be a little bit of a pain, I guess. We could do something with inverting the background, making it white. And I guess we might as well do that. So because we get that black in the background with the AO, I'm just going to, let me see. First of all, if I turn the amount down a little bit. Yeah, I want to do this. Alright. So I'm going to add in basically I need to take the AO and flip it with the image. So I'm going to add in a color ramp. Let's take the AO and plug it into it. Alright. So we have a white and a black image there. Basically, I want to add in the black more. Cool. And I want to add in the white more. So basically I get a nice mask here with white and black. And if I flip that, whoops, I can't flip that. But what I can do is add in a Shift A color invert. There you go. So that's flipped. And now what I can do is I can add in the ambient occlusion with a factor of this. And you should see, maybe I don't want to flip this. Let me just turn that off. Yes, I don't want to flip it. There you go. I don't need the invert node there, I guess. Because it was, yeah, I don't need to flip it. And then if you want to turn the amount down, we can just add in another mix node, color mix. There we go, and then plug that in with the original render. So this is mixing in 100% original, and then with the ambient occlusion, adds in a little bit of dark or black areas in the crevices, a little bit of what you see here in the crevices there. So that can help a little bit. So adding a little bit of that might or help. It's an optional step. You don't have to do that. All right, so now let's add in the glows to these lasers. So to do that, I'm going to Shift A, add in a filter and a glare. And I'm going to switch it from medium to, streaks to fog glow. And right off the bat, you can see it's glowing like a light laser. And that works well because the value of this is such a high emission value that this threshold picks that up right away as like the highest and gives it a glow. So you can turn the size up or down. I think I might want to go up a little bit more. And that looks pretty cool. And then also maybe just the threshold a little bit here. What I like to do is I like to give it a mix of 1 so I can see just what the glow is affecting. And then adjust the threshold from there. So turn it up a little bit more, get some of those clouds areas glowing a little bit. And then I can turn the mix back down to 0. And we can see we have a little bit more glow in there. So maybe not quite so much, but you can see some glow coming in now. And that's nice. So let's add in another glare node. This one I want to be streaks, so let's change it from fog glow to streaks. And basically I want these to be like just 2 streaks straight across, kind of like a lens flare, but not exactly. So I'm just going to turn the streaks down to 2 here. You can see they'll be going straight back and forth there then. I'm going to turn the fade to be way up, so it's streaking pretty much across the whole image there. Even more than that. I'm going to turn the threshold up a bit, so it's not everything, but just certain points of it. So turn the threshold up some more. And I want to give it a lot of color modulation, so turn that up. That gives us some cool look. And then turn the fade even higher. And then adjust the threshold some more. Alright. Not really getting what I want with this because of the lasers. So I guess I will go with the 4 streak and not the 2 streak. And turn the fade length down, obviously. Alright, so something like that looks... Let me see. Okay, and then I'm just going to turn the mix down so I don't have too much of it. And should be pretty good. Let me see what that looks like. Turn the amount here down a little bit more. Give it a little bit of an angle. And get that. You're going to play around with the angle, but that's okay. It looks pretty decent. Turn the threshold down one more maybe. And that's good for that. Let me see. Okay, yeah, that's pretty good. So now I want to add in a little bit of sunbeams with our new sunbeams node that just recently came into Blender. So I'm going to add in a filter sunbeams node. And basically, I'm going to take this color ramp and duplicate it. And then take the image, plug it into the color ramp. And I want to highlight just the bright areas of this. So I'm going to take the blacks way up. And so it's cutting out all of it, but the highlights, all right? So something like that. So we just have the brighter spots of the clouds mainly, and those lasers, of course. And then I'm going to use the sunbeams node into that. You got to turn the ray length up if you want to see anything. And right now it's coming straight from the center, which is kind of cool, but I want it to be more in the upper corner here. So I'm going to turn these values up to about 0.9, maybe 0.95. So it's up there, and then I want to move it over here. So I'm going to give it about a 0.2, and then I'll place it over there like it's kind of coming through the clouds, these sun rays, and it looks pretty sweet. So now all I can have to do is, if I want to adjust the color, I'll add in a color balance, and this can tweak the color if I want to give a little bit of a red tone to these. So that looks kind of cool. Nice. And then a color mix and add. Whoops, you don't need clamp on. I'll just plug that in the bottom there. And you see we get some of that. It looks pretty swift and pretty nice. And if you don't want it over the top of your model quite so much, what you can do is add in a color mix. Actually, what we can do is just grab this right here, which was our mask of that, and plug it in as a factor here. and you see if we invert that, so color invert right there, plug it into that factor, we don't get it on the mesh at all on our model, and it's everywhere else. But I do want a little bit of on the model, so what I'm going to do is a color mix node, and this will affect the amount. White gives it 100%, no white gives it less. So I want some of that, but not all of that. So I'm just going to give it about a 0.4. There we go, 0.4. Does 1.4. 0.4. And a little bit of that looks nice and pretty cool. So that works for that. Now, now this is coming from here, and I want this to come from here. So plug that into there, so we get the glow in there as well. And we're getting there. We're almost done. The glow, the lens flare. Whoops. There we go. How come it's not loading all the way in? There we go. Let it do it again. Cool. So just a few more things now, and that's mainly color correcting. So I'm going to add a color correction, or a color balance. There we go. And we can tweak this a little bit, give it a little bit of orange in the highlights, and give it a little more blue in the shadows. Alright, that looks sweet. Brighten up the highlights, maybe just a tad. Maybe brighten these a little bit. Give us a little bit of an orange color. Brighten up a little bit. Just a little bit of color tweaking here. Something like that. See what that looks like. And not too bad. Maybe just a little bit more red there. Or orange. And cool. So, last thing, and that is basically the lens distortion and the vignette. But we're pretty much there. So for the lens distortion, just a lens distort node. A little bit of dispersion. Always looks cool in these sci-fi renders. I'm just going to give it about 0.1. That's way too much, though. So 0.02. Around the corners helps. There we go. A little bit of that. And then the lens, vignette, which is done with Shift-A. Add in a lens distortion. I've done this a lot, so I'm going to do this fairly fast, but you can just pause the recording and see the finished thing if you want. Lens distort at 1, and a vector converter math. We're going to put a converter math on greater than, put that at 0, and then a blur. So filter, blur, I'm going to change that to fast Gaussian, relative, along the Y, 15 by 15, simple. Then all we have to do is multiply that over the finished results. So mix, multiply, we don't need clamp there. And let's grab our last node there before the vignette, plug it in there. And you get, let's plug that into the composite here too, so we have it set up there. If we let this finish, we get a nice vignette over our image. Turn the amount down just a tad. And last thing, I think I want to add a little bit more of, what did I do there? Oops, this has to be switched. There we go. Last thing, I think I want to add a little bit more of this lens flare to it. So, to do that, all I should have to do is, let me think. Well, if I took this out and gave this a factor of 2, let's see what that does. Boom. Alright, I can just do that. And then add this mix into here. Alright, so what I'm going to do to put this behind it is just mix this with black this time, not white, but black, because I'm going to then multiply it. So let's just duplicate that, plug it into our sun rays, and switch it to multiply. Plug it in there. We'll multiply this image to the bottom of that, and you can see it erases the, if I turn that all the way up, it erases the rays completely off of the mesh and not everywhere else. And now I can put this to like 3, so it's adding it a lot in the background. There we go, maybe even more. And then I can turn this down a little bit if I want a little bit coming over it. So that is the proper way of doing that. Very cool. Maybe let's make that 0.9. So I don't have too much of that, but a little bit is nice looking. And then you can see the rays in the background there as well. So there is the final render, guys. If you want to know how I did the explosions in the background, basically you can follow my explosion tutorial. But basically I just took the mesh, broke it in half a little bit, and then I added the simulation to the mesh with a few particles. So it's basically following my explosion tutorial and just kind of adding it to the X-Wing. Pretty simple. And then, of course, I added a bunch more lasers into my finished scene here. Wait, this is a little dark. Let me brighten that up just a tad there. Cool. Brighten those wings up a little bit. Let me see what that looks like. There we go. Yes, so then I added some of those lasers. So as you can see in this render, some more lasers, some more explosions, and looked pretty nice. So that is the tutorial, guys. Hope you learned something. Hope you had some fun. I don't know if you can hear the dog barking in the background, but she's barking, so someone got to take care of her now. And that'll do it. So I'll see you guys in my next tutorial. Bye-bye. I'm going to quick turn the amount of AO up a little bit there. We'll see what that looks like. And there we go. Not too bad. Nope, that turned it down. I'm sorry. Okay, gone for real now. Add that to that. Cool, and that's it. Bye-bye.